Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt,
And I'm Denny Dumas.
and this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
At this time of year, we have a lot of conversations with potential clients that are thinking about selling. And the question is, do we speed up the process, get photos next week, get it up and running? Do we do open houses in December? Or do we wait for next spring? How do we answer that question?
Oh, it depends, Denny. It really depends. It depends on every scenario. I mean, are the holidays a good time to list? Probably 80, 90% of the time, no. But there is a good argument for a yes. So let's kind of talk about the pros and cons of it. Maybe there's certain product types that are doing better at this moment in time. But in normal season, in normal real estate cycles and markets, December is not the right time to list. The only advantage of listing in December is that you may be the only listing of your type available at that time.
Yeah.
And there'll be a lot of eyes on it. And any buyers that show up will be serious buyers. But does that mean that you're going to have a better price and outcome? I think 90% of the time when I look back at my career, I think you're more likely to get a higher price in January and February. This year might be one of the exceptions. If there are a few more rate hike announcements coming down the pipe, there is a good argument to say December might be a good time to list because, well, one, it could get worse, or two, you could be putting yourself in a buying position if you sold today at a really opportune time in the new year when there's more selection to look for.
December is historically the slowest month in our real estate year, both from a new listing perspective and also from active buyer perspective. A lot of realtors take time off in December. It is just naturally a slow period for us and we try to take advantage. A lot of buyers take time off from even looking at real estate. So usually our suggestions are December is a very slow month. We might get lucky if the right buyer is looking at this period, but January is also a very slow period, January, February, for new listings. And there seems to be more eyeballs on real estate. People get back into the swing of going to open houses and viewing properties and making time for that stuff in January, February. So usually that is one of the things we kind of push people towards. But maybe I think it's important to touch on like who is selling now, who is selling this time of year. And usually that is the person that has is looking to upsize, and the right house came available in November and they need to get their condo townhouse ready to sell very quickly. So I think for the suggestions that we're going to be sharing in this podcast, this is more geared towards the individual that potentially is downsizing, moving out of the city, isn't buying at the exact same time, isn't waiting for something to come up and the right property just came up, but they're more strategic sellers rather than because the right property came up to buy that they need to sell now.
The upgrade or downgrade, like the person that is moving properties, going from one property to another, arguably the biggest thing that we tend to mention is, I guess there's a few things we should acknowledge. Is mid-November. So if they were saying, yes, let's try to sell now, let's say we'd have them up on the market first week of December. If they're up on the market first week of December, they're likely looking at offers by second or third week of December if all goes well. And if they're looking at offers then, they're likely looking at a February or March closing. Yeah. So one argument of selling sooner is, keep in mind, you don't have to sell by listing your property. Listing your property is an invitation to see if buyers exist out there that will pay you a price that you'll be happy with. But if you did look at offers in December, there's a chance you could be leaving some money on the table. But at the other alternative side of that, you are knowing how much your property is selling for going into January and February when there's more listings that will hit the market. And hopefully you can make it up on the buy side. The one big thing that I look at is what exists now that is suitable for you to buy. And if it is nothing, it may not be a time to get aggressive to sell unless you just really value having the cash out and flexibility. If you want to put in other investments, that's one thing. But if you are simply looking to go from a townhouse to a house or a condo to a townhouse or a house to a condo, and there's nothing that you like on the market right now, well, keep in mind you're relying on the moment you accept an offer, you have an end date to move out, and you're relying on something coming up that you like. You can always move into a in-between accommodation to cover yourself. If you have family, even better. But you're relying on a reasonable or good opportunity coming up. And one thing that we're finding in this market is if there's a lot of products that you're willing to move into, you're more likely to get a market price at a good deal in this market for what it is. But if you are, say, buying something that doesn't exist, maybe it's a detached home in a certain price point in a certain neighborhood, the next one that comes up might be overpriced. It might not be a motivated seller. You might find yourselves, by selling today, you might find yourself looking for interim accommodations, moving twice, or potentially being out of the market at a time where the market goes on a 10, 20% run. There's a lot to consider, Denny. It's big, it depends, what if scenario. But I'd say for those that are selling today that live in the places they're selling and are trying to upgrade or downsize, the buy side is very important, and having options on the buy side need to be there.
If you make the decision to sell your home right now, what does the market look like right now? Are buyers active? Is there multiple offers? With interest rates climbing, did all the buyers go away?
That's a lot. Oh, they're still there. They're still there. I don't, we're talking about people moving for lifestyle. There's people sitting on vacant properties. That's a big part of it. Whether it's in a estate sale or you name it, the property became vacant, tenants moved out, and you're sitting on a vacant property. Right now is a market where I don't see any reason to just let your property sit vacant for a few more months than try. It's too uncertain with rate hikes to think that January, February is going to bring in a whole new world of prices. And, if you're sitting on a vacant property, I would say there's no harm in trying. In terms of expectation of selling, a Yaletown 1-bedroom might do better than a Brentwood 1-bedroom right now. There's a lot more Brentwood condos, but I'm not watching the Brentwood market as close, so I might be eating my foot there. But and more luxury homes aren't doing so hot, so don't have high expectations there. And I think the further out in the Fraser Valley, the more likely you are to run into slower products. And there's a lot of, say, areas in Surrey that have ample townhouses that could be getting slow. So the areas that seem to be surprisingly busy, townhouses close to the city, for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, you had an open house last week, and that was pretty busy.
The common misconception, and I think this is media driven, is that everything is slow. And that's just not the reality right now. Townhouses in the Tri-Cities in East Vancouver, still very, very active. The upsizer type product to entry-level homes in a lot of these neighborhoods are still very, very active. We've had 4 townhouse listings in the last 6 weeks. Each of the 4 got multiple offers. Last week, we had a East Van townhouse that got 35 showings roughly, had multiple offers. That's a lot of people coming through. Yeah. Got multiple offers. So there is still a lot of product types that are quite active. And when you say the word multiple offers right now, it's like a trigger thing for consumers. They're like, oh, whoa, I don't want to compete. I don't want to compete. Interest rates are up. I shouldn't be competing. The reality is, like, if you would like to buy this property, you have to work with the scenario that we're in. And multiple offers do look different, though. And I think it's important to kind of share this with consumers and with sellers. First, there's this thought process that if we get multiple offers, our place is going to sell over asking, and it's going to be subject free, and it's going to be exactly like it was in 2021.
It's not February anymore, Danny.
Multiple offers is great. It gives you leverage, but just note that if you are selling a property right now and you get multiple offers, it doesn't mean that subject free offers, deposit attached. It's not the same scenario. In most of these, in these last 4 townhouses, all 4 of them, each offer in those scenarios had subjects in them. A lot of them, it depends a lot on the strategy of where you're listing a property, but a lot of them are still selling under asking slightly with subjects. It's just a different environment. So I think it's important to preface that going into a listing right now. If you have something coming up for sale later in the year or early in 2023, is just preparing sellers for the reality of today's market versus what their neighbor sold for in February.
So the holidays coming up, is it a good time to list? Arguably, a townhouse might be an exception, especially if you're moving to a house. There might be, based on the success we've had lately, last four townhomes, and we've been lucky this year over the last couple of years to be behind a lot of townhome sales. I was very shocked at one of the sale prices, but I don't know all four. Were they in line with prices that would have happened in February, March? Were they higher or lower? What would you say?
Slightly lower.
Slightly lower.
Yeah. But
higher than this time last year, arguably, or maybe around the same. Maybe around the same. Last fall was...
It could be higher than this time last year, to be honest. Yeah. I had a conversation with, same as Jamie, I've had a few people reach out talking about investment properties. And one of the comments one of the people said to me the other day was, well, I'm buying a property right now for 75 cents on the dollar. I said, where are you hearing this from? Because, depending what you're looking for, but in a lot of Greater
Must
Vancouver...
Must be American.
yeah, maybe. In a lot of Greater Vancouver, the investment type property that a lot of people are looking for that we're discussing here is like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom condo, potentially a townhome. And in a lot of these neighborhoods, we're off peak pricing for those types of products, maybe 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
10% kind of on the higher end. And so to answer your question, is it the same prices that would have gotten February? I'd say like 5% lower. It probably would have...
With the exception of Morano Lofts, potentially. That one was pretty good price.
The townhouse?
The townhouse, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, maybe. February was crazy, though. So
you never know when you're going to get lucky, right? When the right buyer exists at the right time for that specific product. And I think that one there was someone that was waiting 2 years or 3 years for that specific property to come up. And in those scenarios, you get a little bit lucky. And you can't predict whether that buyer exists until you try it.
And that property was awesome. Rooftop patio, 5 patios right on the Key River. This is a place in New Westminster that we sold recently.
The seller did a phenomenal job of getting it ready to sell. It photographed extremely well. Yeah, the stars aligned for that one.
Before we go too deep on this tangent, maybe explain what cities were those 4 townhouses in?
There was 2 in New West, 1 in Port Moody, 1 in southeast Vancouver.
Yeah. So to put that in perspective, I don't think we would see the same outcome in a lot of the Fraser Valley markets if we had a townhouse. So this is specifically, New West, short on, north of the Fraser River, short on townhouses, Tri-Cities, short on townhouses, Vancouver, same story. So these are markets where families need a place to live and there's just not enough entry-level 3 bedrooms.
Exactly. And most of the people coming through, specifically for this one last week, are young couples, young families that are looking to upsize lifestyle moves. This is not investors. This is not like overseas buyers. This is people that live in Greater Vancouver that are wanting more space.
Yeah. You touched on offers. You touched on multiple offers. If this was earlier this year, when you hear multiple offers, you'd be thinking $100,000, $200,000 above list, subject free to have a chance. Now it's very common to get multiple offers, with every offer being below the list price, every offer having subjects, some of them maybe even having subject to sale. So if you love a property, don't shy away from it because of multiple offers. Doesn't mean that it's going to go well above. There are still, I remember I took a glance at, say, I think it was the detached house sales in New Westminster. And when I looked at it earlier this year, in say March or April, the last 20 sales, 19 of them were above list. Like they sold over asking. And the shift is, when I look at the last 20 sales now, I'd likely see the reverse of that, where 1, maybe 2 of them sold above the list price, but 19 or 18 of them sold below. So multiple offers still do happen, but doesn't always mean above list. Those are more uncommon, but they still happen maybe 5-10% of the time.
From a buyer perspective, we do hear the comment of, I don't want to compete. We hear that quite often. And my comment is always like, do you like the house? Yeah, we love it. Let's figure out a number that makes sense and write an offer. And if we don't get it, we move on. But the idea of not competing to me doesn't really make sense for a property that you like. Figure out what market value is. Let's write an offer at that. And if we don't get it, oh well. But often in those scenarios, people still have this feeling that multiple offers are exactly like they were in February, where you have to write subject free, and people still feel uncomfortable with that. So I think in changing markets, it's important to understand like where a property's listed. Are they listed low on purpose to create multiple offers? And if they're listed low on purpose, we might get a pretty good deal, because a lot of consumers feel uncomfortable going over list price right now, even though the market value is above list price. If you are taking our suggestions and you don't need to sell right now and you're waiting till spring, what things can you focus your time on to ensure that you have a successful sale in the spring?
A big reason to hold off, and you're using spring here as an obvious example, is to improve the look of your place. When we're walking in, the presentation matters. The best sale outcomes we get, the moments we get the luckiest with those sale prices are properties that show the best often. So, I mean, an obvious one is paint. It's not in right now this time of year, probably inside, interior paint, but look at everything that's broken and fix it. Every light bulb, make sure your lighting works. Make sure your paint is good. Consider floors. If the floors are terrible, and you're not selling till next year, paint and floors are two items that probably have the highest returns I can think of. I don't know if I often don't suggest people get into kitchen and bathroom renos just because the price point's higher. Unless you're in the business, you're kind of creating work for yourself. But paint and floors are often recommended. And when you do have those openings with the weather, it is important the outside looks good. But if you did, say, wash your gutters now, they're probably going to get grimy by next spring. So the suggestion for next year leading up to your listing would be to focus on the outside.
Yeah.
But right now, I'd be focusing on paint, floors, making sure every door opens and closes, all your light fixtures work, and just start chipping away at that list of repairs.
Yeah. Focus on the interior. Do things that are going to help change the impression as people walk in the door. So paint, touch-ups, things like that. The floors is a fantastic idea if you can do it. Floors is a tricky one that you've got to move everything out of those rooms, and it can be a bit invasive. But focusing on the interior, fixing things that are broken, and a lot of times people will do renovations over years. They'll like chip away at things. So if a renovation is 80% done, or if you've bought new appliances, a new fridge, a new stove, but you have an old white dishwasher and everything else is stainless steel, it would make sense to spend that $1,000, get a stainless steel dishwasher that matches the rest of the set to kind of finish that renovation.
But on that note, if you have a stainless steel dishwasher or a stainless steel fridge in an old kitchen, don't feel that you need to have all stainless steel if the kitchen's old, right?
Totally.
This is just if you're missing one piece of the puzzle to change the overall feel.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then exactly like Jamie said, focus on the exterior when the weather gets a little nicer, closer to the listing, because you're going to have to do it again if you do it right now in the winter.
There are some scenarios where trying the market today might make sense. And based on what the vibe that we're getting with a lot of products, there's no indication that 2 months from now is going to be significantly different. In most normal markets, and if you're not in a rush, there's a good argument just to wait and see. If you are buying something after you sell, maybe instead of testing the market November, December, be first on in January. January usually has more buyers. And if you are one of the lucky listings that is the only one of your kind that comes onto the market in January, you could have a great outcome. There's been many markets in the past where January, February, March sales were better than later in the year. And if you did sell in January, you're putting yourself in a buying position in February, March, and April, which is a great time to have selection. And with the vibe that I'm getting for 2023, I think it's going to, as a whole, I think it's still going to be slow before it gets better. So it could get slightly worse before it gets better. I'm guessing at the tail end of next year, we'll start seeing it turn around, but I have no clue what to expect in the first 6 months of next year. I think spring is naturally going to be busier. Is that busyness going to hold at 6+% prime rates if it gets there? We're at 5.95. So let's say it levels off at 6.25 or 6.5. Hard to imagine how busy it can get at that level, but I think it could. If it gets to 8, I don't know. I don't think it'll get there, but I'm not the guy that pulls the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, looking at where inflation numbers are going down, back to closer to normal rates, or closer to what the government of Canada is trying to achieve here, it seems like we're near the end, but our market is heavily dependent on what happens in the next few months.
Yeah. And Vancouver's gone against the world in the past,
Totally.
Yeah. Denny, how do people get clarity on whether to buy or sell today versus next year? Where do they go?
I think the first step is to talk to a fantastic realtor or a real estate team.
Oh, is this a moment to plug our sponsors?
Who's our sponsor?
Well, the Garbutt Dumas real estate team. Any listeners that made it this far, we would love to work with you. understanding the timing of when to sell and buy really is case by case. We like to look at the buy side. Oftentimes we have to bring clarity to the buy side. It can take a couple months to get through this process. It can take a couple years. It can take a week. We can move fast. We can move slow. We are patient, but we would love to hear from you if you're thinking of making a move.
A lot of people feel like they are bothering us or wasting our time if they are 6 to 12 months away from buying and selling. But it's really important to have these conversations early and build a game plan. Even if you're a year away, we would love to hear from you. We would love to kind of chat your situation through and make sure you are prepared for when the time comes.
Yeah, we're often right now making suggestions on how to improve the value for next year too. So just putting your home in a spot where it will have a great outcome on market. If you need some help, suggestions, reach out. That's it, Denny.
That's it. Thanks for listening.